What?
Why are you shaking your head?
You're welcome. Welcome into another wonderful Tuesday night, or if you're listening to this at a different point, whether it be Wednesday morning or Thursday or Friday, whenever you're joining Dynasty Points, we're happy to welcome you back in another fun, hectic, and sad week because the NFL giveth and it taketh away like it does all the time. But with that comes a wide range of panic, a wide range of absolutes being spoken online, in leagues, very reactionary stuff going on, which we obviously like, well, some of us like to stay out of. This is where being more, level-headed might give me an advantage at times compared to what we're seeing from conversations in the Fantasy Points Dynasty rankings chats to different leagues and DMs and multiple Discords. I have been all over the place trying to gather as much information on how people are feeling about Malik Nabers. And Jacob, way back when with Full Tilt, you and I did a whole show on selling and buying injured elites. So we're going to bring some of that here to Dynasty Points. Joining me as always is Ryan Heath. Lucas Gilbert is back. We had a crazy week in the weekly game, so we'll do that at the end of the show. We'll try to hit some questions more towards the end. But like we've been doing, let's, of course, bring in the comment review. And I got to tell you, you guys are becoming softies. A little bit of softies here. We've got D&D JD JFB testing my ability to read early. Said, love the show. Came across it searching for info on which to trade, Benson or Judkins. Well, glad you found us. Hope you came back this week. William 12 said, so Trevor will be good in 6 years, age 31, talking about when he joins KOC in Minnesota from last week. So 6 years from now, Jacob can finally take his Trevor Lawrence victory lap. And then Theodore Darling.
Hey, Lawrence beat Purdy, and QB wins are all that matters. So Lawrence greater than Purdy, suck my dick.
Theodore Darling wants to know, how do I get Jacob's updated Dynasty rankings? Jacob, that is obviously released at Thinking About Thinking.
There's a link that I post every week. I haven't updated them yet for this most recent week, but usually it's on Wednesday. I will post a link every week that goes to a Google sheet that has my updated rankings. If you go to jacobsanderson.substack.com, you can see the link for the post week 3 rankings, which are only 1 week old. They will be shuffled again probably tomorrow.
Sounds great. There you go. Just right out the gate, we've got no wonder Ryan is stuck in his rum. Those guns won't pass any security. No guns out today for Ryan. He's covered it up. Everyone's wives are safe. Let's talk about our player spotlight. Every week now we like to profile one player that either had a breakout week or there's a lot of chatter. A player that we made the decision between Davante Williams and Kendre Miller. We're going with Kendre Miller. Obviously, the Dynasty Fantasy community is already doing the thing where they're projecting one player going to another team because a young player broke out. This happens all the time. This time it's Alvin Kamara going to the Chiefs. Sure. But Kendre Miller did look pretty good. But we also have Taysom Hill coming back. The Mormon missile is on his way back to the field to steal touchdowns, making things a little murky. But it is Dynasty. He is a young running back. So player spotlight, thoughts, Jacob, on Kendre Miller from this weekend. How do we kind of project it going forward?
Yeah, so the most exciting thing about Miller is that he looks good, which we had no idea if he was good at all until this season. He was, a fine prospect. I don't think an exceptional one, but I think a high upside one. And then he basically wasn't allowed to play for 2 straight years because Dennis Allen hated him. And by the time that he did start last year, the team was so hopeless that he was quite inefficient, but it was kind of hard to know how much of that was his fault because he was starting on this completely broken team. Goes into a camp battle this year with Devin Neal, wins that camp battle, and is now kind of upgraded from a pure backup to an actual guy in the offense. I'm pretty sure his touchdown this week was on their first drive. So he was already getting into the mix right off the hop. And yeah, I think I would say that the chances are over 50% that he is the RB1 for the Saints during the fantasy playoffs this year. Just if you add up the aggregate percentage, Alvin Kamara suffers a very legitimate injury that actually keeps him out of those games. Alvin Kamara suffers a maybe not that major injury, but they shut him down for the season because they're 2-12. And Alvin Kamara is traded to the Kansas City Chiefs. I think all of those are somewhat in play. None are maybe over 50% in and of themselves. But if you say it's like 20, 20, and 20, that gets you to 60. And I think it's pretty possible considering just that the Saints are going nowhere this year. Alvin Kamara is not really doing anything for them this year. And finally, the New Orleans Saints aren't run by like a member of the New Orleans Saints industrial complex. Like they've brought in the Kellen Moore from the outside, who's not part of this sort of Sean Payton, Mickey Loomis, Dennis Allen was in with them. Continuation of mediocrity chasing. Kellen Moore has no allegiance to Alvin Kamara. He has no allegiance to any of these Saints. He also has no allegiance to Taysom Hill, right? He's not part of this weird hive mind Taysom Hill obsession. So I think it's a pretty reasonable chance that they want to see what their young guy has at the end. So I'm excited for Kendre Miller. I think he's a guy that's like, I wouldn't pay a 2 for him by any stretch, but like you can sell yourself a chance that he's going to be worth that by the end of this season.
Ryan?
Jacob mostly covered it, I'd say. The chat kind of brought up like the only one nitpick I have, which is just that there's been little to no passing game role. He literally didn't run a route in week 4, which was kind of a surprising little stat I found as we were loading up the show here. But yeah, I mean, in terms of, I think as long as we're understanding what this is, which is, as Jacob put it very well, it's sort of a contingent bet / late season. Maybe they just let him play more type of thing. I wouldn't really expect like actual fantasy points until such a time when it's clear that they are moving Alvin Kamara out. And it may not happen either, to also be clear. Like this may just be a 60-40 split where nobody is doing anything or helping anybody in fantasy for the entire season. So yeah, it's kind of a shrug to me. I don't know. I was a little surprised that Kendre Miller was like the guy we wanted to spotlight here. But I mean, yeah, this is it's what we got to talk about in week 4, I guess. I'm sure there are plenty of people excited.
Yeah, well, again, it's just being excited for the potential of another back that you could have gotten off. Look, people love when a player is free. And when a player is free that becomes worth something, it is all hands on deck. Like you said, not a lot of targets, 3, but I mean, it's not like Kamara is exactly catching an obscene amount of targets anymore in this offense. So I'm interested. Lucas wanted to spend his time talking about a Devy player that doesn't matter in Dynasty, but I mean, the people need to know what you have with Kendre / Mr. Martinez.
I mean, I loved Kendre Miller coming out of TCU. He had a epic run up to the national championship game that season whenever TCU was actually good, not whenever Colorado thought they were good and went on the road to beat them. But regardless, he has been banged up. He didn't have much of a passing role in college, so I'm not entirely surprised that he's not getting targets. And I don't think that this offense is really highlighting the running backs in the passing game for some unknown reason. Maybe it's just the Rattler effect, but they're just not going to be checking it down. So I don't think that's really the role we're looking at. I do have to mention, though, like, coming out, he was banged up after the national championship game. He played hurt, I think, through the first half against Michigan. He wasn't able to test whenever he went to the combine, but he's not like this athletic marvel. Neither is the person who is sitting behind him, Devin Neal. But Devin Neal, at least as a profile, is a much more complete running back who just happens to run the 4.6s, so nobody really wanted to touch him. I'll be really curious to see if he can earn some of this coaching staff's trust. And if we start seeing him registering some carries, then I'm going to be paying really close attention to how that snap share ends up breaking down. But he's a lot of fun right now. It's been a long time coming for the Miller truthers out there. It's really nice to see some of my shares actually have a point on my bench, so I'll take it.
I want to know two quick things before we move on with this. One is that has anyone ever watched Tyler Shuck under pressure? No one fears contact more than this guy. It's like if he gets hit, he thinks it's going to be his last day on earth. So if and when the Shuck demon gets into the mix here, which I suspect happens at some point this year, I don't see why they would be intent on going 2-15 without ever taking a look at the quarterback they took 40th overall. I think he's going to check the ball down more frequently than Rattler, who's more athletic and is more of a gunslinger. The other thing I'll note, is something that I seemingly have just forgotten, despite thinking that I had a good point like 2 seconds ago. Oh, I remembered it now. Look, if you have Caleb Johnston, first of all, you're probably sad right now. But we have now just spent 2 weeks in a row talking about resuscitated third-round running backs from the grave in Trey Benson, and now we're talking about Kendre Miller. So that's the light at the end of the tunnel. I would be trying to see just how low I can call bottom on Caleb Johnston this week. Could I get him for a very late 2? Could I even get him for a 3 and a little something? I'm just interested because I feel like the light, unless you're like Trey Sermon or Tyrion Davis-Price, there's always chances for these guys to come back around.
And I will say,
the light at the end of the tunnel is Ryan rolls his eyes on Dynasty Points and can barely pretend to be excited while Lucas waxes poetic about the prospect profile. That's the light at the end of the tunnel.
Of his backup.
Yeah.
He's waxing poetic about his backup's prospect profile.
Something I forgot to mention about Miller is whenever he came out, he was only 21. He is one of the rare running backs who's 6 foot, 220 plus. So that's another reason why everybody got so excited about him. 23 right now, younger than RJ Harvey and several other running backs who came out. So it's fun. It's finally fun and never wrong. Just a little early or a little late here. Better late than never. So I'm going to start taking victory laps probably in the next 2 weeks on Kendre Miller, and I'll forget that he exists after that.
Yeah, that's the classic Twitter fantasy football analyst for you.
Man of the people.
Man, well, don't ask the people that on any day where you are running 5 for 5 because they'll surely disagree with you. That being said, that's comment review. That is our player profile. So kind of buying in a little bit here on Kendre Miller. Need to see a little bit more, but we're talking about a player that you could still likely get in some throw-in scenarios. I like where Jacob had mentioned, and then I like his comment on Caleb because that's how we roll. A little bit of bonus. Let's take our first break. When we come back, we're going to get into what everyone is waiting for. How are we handling Malik Nabers? And how do we handle future elite player injuries? Because I have some opinions. So sit tight. Don't go anywhere. We'll be right back.
This is Nick B, and I'm reading this ad because I was my fantasy league's biggest loser. So if you want to win your fantasy league and make more money, head to fantasypoints.com to get the edge you need.
Okay. First off, this really sucks. Right? I think that's the first thing we need to lead off with here. Jackson Dart finally gets his start. Looks awesome. They upset the Chargers. He's running around like a madman. He has got an absolute cannon attached to his shoulder. Like, he is unreal. And then, of course, we get the big injury. All the chats blow up. And I have immediately seen some staggering trades. We're not going to get into the actual trades until the next section. We're just going to talk about the theory and strategy behind buying and selling elite players who get hurt or are suspended. We can talk about CeeDee Lamb and the effect of a high ankle will lead to people selling quickly for points for some reason in week 4, which I've seen. Just a lot of stuff to get to on this Malik Nabers stuff. I'll throw it over to Jacob first. Let's open up. How should people be looking at this? Yeah,
so anytime there's a massive injury like this, and Malik Nabers coming into this week was my 4th overall ranked player in Dynasty. This is my Dynasty wide receiver 1. This is a seismic injury. It's a guy that was going in the first round of, I think, every Dynasty startup I did this whole offseason. It's a massive change to the framework of your team as a contender if you have them. We'll maybe get onto the rebuilder side later, but the calculations for rebuilders is very simple. You should probably be interested in acquiring injured stars, and it's just how much are you willing to pay? How much of a discount do you need? But talking about the contender aspect is to me a little bit more interesting. There are some teams out there that will have so much value, just overflowing with value, that you can manage to just stick Malik Nabers in your IR spot and carry on. But if you think about it, Malik Nabers was worth, prior to this injury, pretty universally in like the 3 firsts type of range of player. How many teams out there that are contenders would you be willing to trade, production out of your lineup for 3 first-round picks and then still have a contending team? Maybe some, but not probably that many of them. You essentially need to have a team that is either like very, very old and all in, or if it's a team that's like 5 to 6 firsts over the baseline expectation of value. So for those other teams, you kind of have 3 options, which is 1, you trade Malik Nabers for near-term production. 2, you trade other pieces from your team, rookies that aren't scoring a lot of points, future draft picks, maybe other injured players, for production to backfill Nabers while he sits on IR. Or 3, you decide you're not going to contend anymore. You keep Malik Nabers and you trade other players. I'm not going to hog the whole sequence here, but to me, that's the first sort of thing you have to do, is decide, okay, which of those 3 makes the most sense? What are the options available to me, canvassing the league, depending on what option I want to do the most. And then you try to figure it out from there. And we'll talk about maybe the specifics over the rest of the show today.
Yeah, I like a lot of that. And I think, again, that also can apply to somebody like CeeDee Lamb as well. Obviously, he is not lost for the season, but I mean, high ankle sprain on a wide receiver, that could be most of the season, really, even when he comes back and playing at elite level.
It arguably applies to Ja'Marr Chase, who's totally healthy, but he's not going to produce like you would expect Ja'Marr Chase to produce this year with Jake Browning's team. So,
right. And so it applies to all these guys and all these elites, and it kind of plays into what I talked about on the mini pod this week, which is that safety in Dynasty just doesn't exist the way that people think it does, right? This was, it was Puka last year. We knew Puka was great, but Puka got hurt, and it was, now I don't want to have Puka. He's injury prone, etc. Then you get a little bit of a discount on him, and those who bought sitting pretty good this year. So I think it goes for all of these elite type players. Ryan, what do you have on this? How do you look at it, either from a rebuilder or a contender perspective? It's almost impossible to buy as a contender, really, but let's see what you got.
Yeah, so I guess first I'll start and just say I agree with Jacob. If you're a rebuilder, you should be looking in every single league where you are rebuilding and seeing which roster is Malik Nabers on. Is there actually an offer I can put together where this Nabers owner would be incentivized to sell to me? Like that is like number one thing you should do while you're listening to this episode. Open up your rosters, see which team's Nabers is on, see if you can do that. That's like number one way I'd want to take advantage of this. But yeah, from the contender side, it's more interesting just because a lot of what you do should probably be determined by what your league is going to allow you to do. So my number one thing I don't want to do if I have Nabers on a contender is trade him away for 80 cents on the dollar. Even if it is backfilling points into my lineup, if it's increasing my percentage chance of winning this year, that is if you are selling Nabers for like even half a first less than he's actually worth, you are hurting your team like down the line for years to come. Most likely. This is not like, I am fine saying, okay, Nabers for JSN in a couple seconds or something like that. Totally fine deal. Could do that. What I would not do is, oh my God, nobody will give me anything for Malik Nabers. So I'm going to sell him for like, I don't know, a Breece Hall and Deebo Samuel is like a real trade I saw on Fantasy Calc. Like number one thing I'm avoiding is even if you're a contender, I need points, that should be secondary to I'm getting commensurate value. So that's like the first thing I want to say. If you can't get commensurate value, then it is between, do I ride this out and continue to try to contend with Nabers on my IR spot burning a hole in it, or do I sell off all my other pieces? And this is also going to be very team dependent, but I would rather take worse value for like smaller pieces around your team that are not going to be in the aggregate as big of a value loss and as big of an issue for you into 2026, 2027, than to take a big value loss just on Nabers just to keep your team contending. Like if it's between selling Nabers at a big loss versus selling whatever CMC and Alvin Kamara that you have on your team at a value loss and pivoting into a rebuild, I would rather get worse value for those lower value assets just because that is less of a loss you're taking. And that sucks. I get that. Nobody wants to just turn around their roster because their best player got hurt on it. But I think that is often a better idea than I'm going to do whatever I can to get any sort of points in exchange.
Jacob, you look like you were thinking there.
Well, I have a lot to say, but I was going to be polite for a change and let Lucas go first, and then
Lucas, go ahead.
Well, it's ironic we're talking about Malik Nabers. I mentioned it in our chat, but I had offers for Malik Nabers on one of my contending teams from a rebuilder, actually. And this person canceled their trade as soon as the injury happened and sent me a new trade at, probably 70% of what the original trade's value was 5 minutes after Malik Nabers went down. So that one felt pretty wrong. Just a little rub in there, I guess. And I guess that's a fun way to mock your owners, is as soon as you see one of their players go down, start spamming offers to them about, are they panicking enough to take something like that? But whenever we're talking about a player where there's only so few of them in fantasy football, which is the reason I didn't want to trade Nabers in the first place, is there's only so few truly elite wide receivers in the game who are at this age and will carry value for a long time, because as soon as he's healthy, he's going to be just as valuable again. Maybe not quite, at the tippy tip of where he was, but he's going to be a first round startup pick, or he's going to be, 202 or something like that in your drafts. So I don't think that's a player that you have to make any sort of decisions on right now. Same with your teams. You don't have to make a decision this week. You have a chance to look at how things are going and, then start to come up with your strategy of how you're going to start to replace some of this production in your lineup. Because if you're a true contender with Malik Nabers and you lose him for, say, 2 weeks, you should still be in a relatively good spot to where you're not going to completely miss out on a playoff spot. Like that should just be the way that you're looking at it. If you're not good enough to be a fringe contender without Malik Nabers, then I don't know if you should really be making these moves to be competitive with him in your IR spot.
I'm going to push back on both of you guys. I think I'm more aggressive. I think maybe just than both of you are. I think that is a really high threshold to judge contention on, is if you are unable to contend with 3 firsts of value doing nothing for you, you're not a true contender. I just don't think that that's true. I think you can be a true contender with a slightly above average value team that is weighted towards production, and you probably can't be that when you now just get 3 firsts vaporized from your lineup on you overnight. But I don't think that means that team wasn't a true contender or can't be with the right moves. And I think ultimately, like, to Ryan's point, I'm somewhere in between. Like the specific deal that you said, the Breece for Debo. No, I'm not doing that. I'm definitely not trading Malik Nabers at all costs. But I think it's an expected value play. If you look at your team and you see, like, yeah, this is not, a team that is set up to compete for eternity. but it's also not like some crappy value team that is doomed where I should clearly be trying to dump. Like let's say you have like the fourth or the third most valuable team in your league, if you do the keep trade cut power rankings. And let's say it's a little contention oriented. So you have the second or third most productive roster, notwithstanding a Nabers injury. Like, I'm not punting that season. I think that you're sacrificing more expected value in terms of the monetary value of that team right now to you over time. That's a bigger sacrifice to me than sacrificing like half a first of market value. I'm more willing to sacrifice that value because I want to keep a year of contention alive where I can win money. Now the question becomes, trading Nabers is not the only way to do that. You can also keep Nabers and you can trade draft picks and you can basically say, I'm treating Malik Nabers as my first round pick for the next 2 years. And I'm going to move, a first and other stuff to go and get other assets if that's the more favorable value proposition for you. If I'm looking at the math of this, like prior to this injury, how much would we have said was a reasonable gap between, and I'm going to use Amon Ra St. Brown because I traded Nabers for him straight up in a league. How much would have the gap been? Because I think the gap would have been not quite a first, definitely more than a second, like something in between like 0.6 to 0.8 ones. Now that actual figure is kind of irrelevant. What's more relevant is how big of a gap will be between them next summer. They're both going to be a year older. Amon Ra's a year older matters more, but Nabers is probably going to project to be a little bit of a slow starter. So I'll say it's down to like 0.5 going into next summer. You can quibble with the details, but that's my estimation.
What about, are we applying eventually the entire fantasy community is going to turn on Amon Ra St. Brown for no reason again somewhere in June?
You have like Jameson derangement syndrome. Amon Ra was going in the second round of startups all year. Like
I'm just saying the fantasy community doubts him every year.
Yeah, they doubt him every year so much that he is drafted in the first round every year of redraft leagues and goes the second round of Dynasty startups.
I have heard people on this show talk about how they don't view Amon Ra St. Brown as an elite fantasy wide receiver.
Yeah, but I still have him as a wide receiver. What?
I had to ask.
Anyway, so let's say it's like an early 2 next year. Is that?
Oh, we lost Jacob.
Oh, damn. We got him out of here. We didn't like what he was saying. Yeah.
Hey, I had to show him and remind him who's boss in terms of this Amon Ra St. Brown business.
I don't think that this has happened on the show since Billy was on, and you all used to kick each other all the time.
Well, it hasn't.
My plug-in and everything went to shit.
I thought Jacob's computer died again. We needed to start another GoFundMe to get a new one.
No, I literally just my fucking adapter. I grazed it with my finger, and it apparently couldn't withstand that. Anyway, my apologies. So let's what we do in any economics class. Let's assume a perfectly liquid, perfectly competitive market, just for sake of argument. So let's say there's an early second gap. If you want to say it's a little bigger, say it's bigger between Nabers and Amon Ra next summer. So how much would you pay for just the rest of this season of Amon Ra St. Brown in Dynasty? If someone was you can have him, let's say you played in a league with rentals. They said, you can have Amon Ra St. Brown just for the rest of this season, but you have to give him back to me on January 1. What would you pay for that? I would pay definitely an early 2. I don't think I'd pay a 1, but I would definitely pay an early 2. So to me, I look at it and I'm like, well, right now I'm trading them straight up. I think next summer there's going to be an early 2 or a little bit more gap. I'm basically treating that as I'm paying that early 2 as my rental, just to get these points now that I otherwise wouldn't have had. If the price was higher than that, if the price was I have to trade Malik Nabers and a second for Amon Ra St. Brown, now to me I'm kind of moving 2 seconds for that rental because I'm taking the future loss and I'm paying an extra second now. That's where I look at it and say, well, I think I'd rather just trade a late 1 for Davante Adams, and then I can get that rental, and let's say he's worth, a second next year. And so I take a half first loss, but that's a lesser loss than what I would have just taken on the Nabers one. So that's sort of the way I'm looking at it. It's could you get an elite asset? How much is it going to depreciate if you just trade a pick for an elite producer right now? to next year? And is that depreciation going to be less than or more than the loss you expect to take on trading Nabers? It's similar to discussion to what I think we talked about with Joe Burrow 2 weeks ago, where I was like, I would not trade Joe Burrow straight up for Jordan Love because I think there's like a first in value difference between them if they're both healthy. I would rather just trade my first for Daniel Jones and take a loss there and get basically the same thing this season as I expect to get from Jordan Love. So that's how I would view it. In terms of like how much of a total loss am I willing to take from now to next year just to remain competitive? It really changes depending on the team. But I think if I have a team that I'm confident is in the top half of the league in value, like a market value, and is in the top 3 of the league in contention value, then I'm going to explore at least making a short-term trade to replace that production, be that either trading Nabers or trading picks for other aspects.
No, I don't know that we disagree a ton. I think more what my take is let's say we're not in like a perfectly liquid, perfectly efficient market, because most leagues are not.
No.
That is the reality. Most leagues are not. And I think more my point is if I'm stuck choosing between making one inefficient trade or another, or taking a loss on one trade or another, even if they're similar, like total values. So if you want to say I take a second loss on Nabers versus I'm taking a loss of a second on selling a player that's worth a second or buying one, I would always rather be moving the lesser valued player than be moving the elite.
But in that scenario, I just don't think the math totally lines up, because not only are you losing the value, but you're also losing the expected value of a contention year. And you hope that you eventually get that back, that you would have eventually had to rebuild this team, and now you don't. And so that maybe that you get back to even on that in 2027. But like all things considered equal, I value my opportunity to contend more now than at some point in the future. I mean, partially because inflation exists and I would rather get that money now so that I can invest it and it's worth more later, but also because who knows what the future holds. And if I know I can contend now, I'd rather contend now. And sometimes you have teams that you think you have to rebuild down the line, but then you draft Puka Nacua in the 4th round and it turns out, oh, look, I don't have to rebuild this team that I thought I'd have to rebuild because I got this hit out of nowhere. Like, I just think it's not quite 1-to-1, because if one is I'm selling Christian McCaffrey a little short, and 2 is I'm selling Malik Nabers a little short, I understand the argument why you'd be more willing to sell the depreciating aspect a little bit short. But I think you have to consider also you're giving up, whatever the expected value is of winning your league this year in one of those scenarios and in not the other one of those scenarios.
Yeah, but you're not like, I think you're that's almost thinking like before the Nabers injury happened, right? Like if this was pre-Nabers injury, yes, I would be very sensitive to not nuking my team's expected value for this year. But it kind of already is a little bit. If you're the one sitting there with the Nabers injury and your market in front of you is such that you can't pivot off of something for reasonable value to stay in contention, you kind of are screwed at that point. Like you shouldn't be making the decision from a standpoint of I want to save this year, because the year's already done, essentially.
Well, I don't think that the year's already done. Basically what this is like you used to have Malik Nabers, and that was awesome. And now you don't have Malik Nabers, but you do basically have whatever his market value is in your league. Maybe you can only sell him for 2 first value. Maybe it's 2.5, but you basically just have that in picks. And so now I would be viewing this the same way I always rail on rebuilding teams that don't get aggressive enough to contend, like when they have enough value to do so. I would look at this as, well, if you could have a good enough team to contend by trading this Malik Nabers chip for strong contending pieces, and you could still be a reasonably high value team and you could contend, I want to do that. I agree with you that it's not at all costs. Like, I'm not saying you just make that decision and then you go, I'm locked on this path and I have to trade Malik Nabers for the best offer, even if I don't think it's a good offer. It matters how much you're willing to lose. But like, let's assume that you're in a team where you're willing to at least consider, trading Malik Nabers at a loss to preserve contention. Let's assume it's a team that even after making that Malik Nabers trade, you're still in the top half of your league in total value. You would be a top 3 contender. Like what is like the worst trade you would be willing to accept?
Okay. Yeah. I'll answer that question once I pull up my rankings and I make sure I'm not forgetting someone, but
we cover that in the next section, but if you have a quick answer.
Okay.
Yeah.
I think probably in terms of like getting somebody straight, if my team is such that it's a very legitimate contender, if I make the trade versus obviously it was with Nabers, I think probably JSN is like the worst player I would take for him straight up.
Can I just say though, how available is a player like that going to be in a league? If you got JSN, chances are if you're in week 4, I mean, what are they, 2-2, right?
I've seen 2 straight up Nabers for JSN trades in my leagues already.
Interesting.
I wasn't involved in either of them, but I've seen it twice.
It's just so the way I'm looking at it is you have to be in a league environment where yes, like Jacob said, you have a lot of value in first, so you can look at Nabers as your first round pick, like you mentioned, or you have to be in a situation where somebody is not trying to win. And that happens more often than not, because like Jacob said, there are guys that will just hoard young elite assets and picks and never compete. But what about the scenario where you aren't flush with a ton of extra value? And this is more for Ryan, right? You talked about not every league is an efficient league. And then, you're not likely to get somebody like Roma Dunze. You're not able to go and pluck somebody like Tet McMillan with something on top, because those.
My issue with Tet though is what the fuck does that do for you? I love Tet McMillan a ton, more than maybe anybody right now. I'm very high on him in Dynasty, but like he is a future wide receiver 1 value, you hope, who projects to produce as a wide receiver 3 this year. So like, is he more useful to you than Malik Nabers? Sure. But like, why would I bother taking a loss just to get wide receiver 3 production? That's one where, again, I would rather just trade picks for Davante Adams, who's going to score more than Tet McMillan this year. Like the Amon Ra one is like one that I bring up because I get you obviously rather have Nabers long-term Dynasty. He's way younger. He's 4 years younger. But like before this injury happened, if anyone told you Amon Ra St. Brown will outscore Malik Nabers this year, you'd be like, yeah, that has a 50% chance of happening. Maybe more. Like your team for the rest of this season with Amon Ra on it instead of Nabers is fundamentally the same as it was before you made that trade. Your Dynasty window, probably a little bit shorter, but like your team this year is the exact same. I get that it's not. Someone said, if I'm trying to contend, no, I'm giving JSN for Nabers, and I would say the same thing about JSN as I would for Amon Ra. I value them very similarly. Like, yeah, of course, the teams that are trying to contend are not giving their Amon Ra their JSN for Nabers. Right. I bet there is one team in your league at least that either was an intentional rebuilder or is 1-3, and things haven't gone according to plan, who has a very good player on it. I don't know who that player is. We could go down the list in the next segment of all of the players we would or wouldn't trade Malik Nabers for it. But like, you're targeting managers. You're talking to a couple of managers who have a couple of pieces like a JSN or an Amon Ra or whoever, and saying, would you do this deal? And then maybe those managers are interested and maybe they're not, and you see what the prices are. But you look at the managers that either are already tanking or maybe should be considering tanking, and then you see what they have and you build the deal off of that. I'd say the 2 guys that I think are going to be most popular in these trades, because they're going to be naturally on a lot of teams that are tanking. One's Emeka Egbuka. He was a rookie. Who has the most rookie picks? Teams that aren't winning the previous year. I bet Egbuka is on a ton of teams that went into this year planning to rebuild. And I've already seen several iterations of Egbuka Nabers trades, and we can talk about some of those. The other one is not a wide receiver, but maybe you don't specifically need a wide receiver. Ashton Jeanty is an interesting one, where a lot of teams that have Jeanty are they were the worst team in the league last year, and that might be one to explore. So
the natural 101 type scenarios where they
Hampton you could throw in this mix too. Yeah.
You're right in that regard. That's why I wanted to talk about it, because it's easy to sit and say, of course, just trade him for that next awesome elite wide receiver. Well, what if, right? And we'll get into some of these trade concepts that I've gotten today, and then we'll talk through a lot of that. But I felt it was important to mention maybe things aren't as perfect in your league for, like Ryan said, like the perfect market to get out of these deals or get some of these players, because some of the trades, not only that I have seen, to some that I have been asked about, and just the general idea of, I know I'm contending here in week 5. I need to get these points, is something that I don't subscribe to. So unless like if your team is like yours and how it is in Foot Clan Reborn, right? Your team is just so stacked for the next 5 years the way it out, now you're like, all right, I am contending in week 5, and I know it. Let's go get more points. So I feel like those are big differences when discussing how to handle and the trade with Nabers / what to get. So let's get to our next break. When we come back, we're going to talk about trade concepts. Like Jacob mentioned, we're going to talk about players we would and wouldn't trade. We got some super chats that we're going to answer. I have starred some trade questions from the chat itself. We're going to try to tie some of those in here, so we're not here too long. But sit tight. Don't go anywhere. Quick break. We'll be right back.
45 seconds? Nah, that. This ad is over after I say fantasypoints.com.
All right, let's answer the super chats first. You guys are great for that. Not something you have to do, but again, we appreciate it. John wants to know, should I blow my FAAB $440 on Slayton? I'm desperate. Lost Hill and is thin. And then he wants to know if we should, or if we could rank Rachaad White or Kendre. Thank you. So how much FAAB are you in on Slayton?
None.
That's your redraft question, I imagine.
Like a very minimal amount. He's Darius Slayton. He gets an upgrade, of course, but like, what's the hope here? That he is like a Romeo Dobbs, Darnell Mooney type of play rest of the season, like a startable guy, sure, but I don't think he's leading you to the promised land.
Yeah,
I have picked him or put him in on waivers a couple of times this week in the leagues where I had Nabers in redraft. And, right now there's not a lot out. If you're in 12 plus team leagues in terms of wide receivers that are just sitting out there to be picked up, it's kind of rough. So I can understand wanting to be really aggressive and trying to swing for the fences here. But I think you also just need to realize that there's still a long way to go. I wouldn't be looking to spend all of your FAAB on somebody whose upside is, if we're lucky, potentially 11 points a game with one nice big game followed by a couple of 4-point stinkers that you have to deal with. So just be realistic with what you're getting out of it.
Think about what happens here, right? Like you lose Tyreek Hill. Your team is now on the wrong side of the variance. You need variance to swing back in your direction. Spending all of your FAAB on Darius Slayton, you're taking one of the few tools that you have left at your disposal to reverse that variance in your favor on a very low ceiling outcome. So I think it's, your goal ultimately is to finish first. It's not to get marginally better. So I would rather keep my FAAB and hope, and it might not happen, but hope that like you get a chance to get a Woody Marks or a Trey Benson, a higher impact player off of waivers that is maybe more comparable to Tyreek Hill than what Darius Slayton's going to be able to do.
Yeah. Also, just want to say, I don't know if this is like an option for this specific person, but I would rather be adding like Isaiah Bond off waivers than a Darius Slayton. Bond up at he I believe tied for the team lead in targets after Tillman was knocked out. Was in like a full-time route share role. He was pretty consensus like day 2 prospect. The Browns, the entire goal of their season seems to be, we're going to see what we have in the young guys and the rookies. So if you need to swing on a wide receiver, it would be Bond. I wouldn't spend 444% of my FAAB on it. But that's maybe more where I'd be looking.
Some Malik Washington too. That I don't think that's a terrible one either, if I'm being honest.
All the rookies in Cleveland except for Shador.
I would, yeah, jeez. I would rather just throw multiple darts at wide receiver than load up on one Darius Slayton. Is basically how I would look at it. And then Rendon Dye said, should I trade Ja'Marr Chase plus Chuba Hubbard for Alvin Kamara and JSN? I like
yes.
Format this is.
Yes, and I might definitely in redraft. And I think it's less crazy than it seems in Dynasty.
Yeah.
Wouldn't do it in Dynasty, would do it in redraft.
But like
we found the line where Jacob and I disagree on how much value
they'd add I don't think I would do it in Dynasty either. But like if they'd add a second.
Yeah, that's a little much for me yet, but there you go. Hopefully that helps. All right, let's get into some. Oh, you said it is redraft. So yes, absolutely. Yeah. I would do that.
I think teams, if I get it if you play in 6 leagues, and you have one share of Ja'Marr Chase and you don't want to live life without that share of Ja'Marr Chase. I get that. But like if you're a portfolio player, I would probably actually be even more aggressive in trying to trade Ja'Marr Chase right now than Malik Nabers. Nabers is going to be treated more obviously like there's an injury discount from prospective managers. Chase is playing, so I don't think that the injury discount is going to be quite as required. But like, you don't have Ja'Marr Chase for the rest of this season. You have like, a guy who's going to be like a wide receiver 22. So if you could get 95 cents on Ja'Marr Chase on contenders, I think it is a pretty interesting move to try to do. I don't know how possible it is, but interesting.
Yeah. Very interesting. I don't mind looking at it that way. With that being said, let's talk about some trades. How do you guys want to start this? I have got trades that I have been sent to discuss. We can talk about that first, whether we would or wouldn't, and move that into players that we would or wouldn't trade for specifically. I think that kind of works the best. I've got from Joe Poe, who sent me a deal, Malik Washington and Malik Nabers for Kyler Murray and AJ Brown was a deal that he got done today.
Sorry, you said something in Nabers for Kyler and Brown. What was the something?
Washington and Nabers for Kyler Murray and
Washington.
Brown.
Yeah, that is a deal I would not do. Like I would want the Nabers side of that, no matter what my team situation is.
Same. So that is a perfect structure, whether you're contending or rebuilding.
Yeah, I mean, if I'm contending, I'm not saying I would necessarily go ahead and trade for Nabers just to like obliterate myself from contending. But like, that's certainly a deal where if I'm a rebuilder, I'm trading for Nabers, you're smiling when you get the accept on that. And if I had Nabers and that was the best offer available, I'm not choosing that path. I'm either trading other things to backfill my production or I'm rebuilding my team.
Yep. I liked that one. Then there was another one that I got sent Breece Hall and Quentin Johnston or Malik Nabers into 27 second.
Yeah, that's the same answer I just had. I'll give you one. I did 2 Nabers trades today. I already told you the one where I traded Nabers away for Amon Ra. I'm an equal opportunity trader. The one where I traded for Malik Nabers. Now, I don't know how replicable this is because these are not players that are common on rebuilders. This team was one where I've contended the whole time I've been in this league. I think we're in year 5. But I have quite literally one starting quarterback on my team. It's Lamar Jackson, who's now going to miss 2 to 3 weeks. My QB2 for the lifetime of this league has been Kirk Cousins, who, of course, is no longer a starting quarterback. So I was looking at taking a 0 at the quarterback position. I'm also already have Mike Evans out in this league. Team's getting old. It's not looking good. So I figured, you know what a better moment than now, to use this Nabers injury as a chance to see if I could get the kind of trade that would allow me to kind of blow this thing up and restart. So I sent Christian McCaffery and Arthur Juan Brown for Malik Nabers.
What was that one, sorry?
CMC, a player that you won't commonly find on rebuilders. But you can find on failed contenders. So CMC and AJ for Neighbors.
Yeah, that's one of those deals I'd be looking to do in like home league, right? Because my team is so on the fence. I have Christian McCaffery. I did just lose my first game, but I can like see the end of that team coming, and I would definitely pivot if I've got the opportunity. But yeah, I like that deal. Again, that's when you make the decision. Like you're making an obvious decision that it's time to cut bait and then pick up later to go. We got some people on.
And then I followed that up by just doubling down on injured guys. I then traded Lamar and Davante Adams for Burrow and a first and 2/3.
Man, I think I like that one too. Yeah, I like those structures a lot. That's a good
I
way
also
to get
traded
that done.
Cortland Sutton and Debo for some picks, but that's kind of whatever.
Yeah, that's a total teardown for sure. But Burrow's another guy we haven't talked about a lot. We can mention him, but everything that we're mentioning in terms of the theory and a lot of these structures apply to me, as Jacob mentioned, for Ja'Marr Chase. I think it applies for Joe Burrow. Although I'm really out on Burrow. Like at this point, how many times is this guy going to get knocked out for the year? Basically, it's like every other year he's in contention for comeback player of the year because every other year he goes down. It's brutal. It's like very Chad Pennington-y. It's rough, man. Shout out.
Reminds me more of one particular quarterback, and I hope he plays a lot longer.
Jesus Christ, why would you? Yeah, I know. Everybody's been making that comparison, and it just like makes me clench my jaw.
It's just uncomfortable how similar it is. It's really uncomfortable how similar it is.
I was off the
Andrew Luck.
Oh yeah. Ooh, yeah.
Right? Like
brutal.
It's like, a player who's like the only good thing about their organization, team continuously fails to address the offensive line. Player continually gets hurt while attempting to carry horrible franchise. Player is too good for coach and GM to ever get fired despite their obvious incompetence. I've seen this movie before. It's depressing.
Yeah.
At least Burrow did get to a Super Bowl.
Well, if they didn't deflate those balls. I mean,
true.
Do you guys remember how bright the future was for the Cincinnati
Bengals? Ryan's such a shitty Pats fan. He couldn't even get angry about that comment. Like just an absolute nothing burger of a fan.
Yeah, that just completely rolled off my back. I didn't even hear or register whatever the Patriots related comment was. I just wanted to jump right to making fun of the Bengals.
I was making a deflate gate joke.
Oh yeah, I don't care. That one will never trigger me in any way.
Well, Ryan, you think you are a tortured Pats fan, right? Like you think you're in purgatory. That's correct, right?
Like the Patriots are in purgatory?
Yeah, just you as a fan.
Oh yeah, I mean it's kind of whatever. Like
Pats vibes seem great. Like I don't know if Tom's there yet, but like Drake May seems pretty good to me.
Yeah, no, he seems good, but it's not at the point yet where I'm so invested, like from the day to day, like ups and downs of the team, where it's going to phase me in any way.
You make me upset. Just like everything about you just makes me upset whenever you talk about
it. This is because
this passionate tone.
This is because in his formative years, all they did was win, and so now he's kind of like, I've been there, done that.
House money.
Had a whole bunch of winning. Like, how many more Super Bowls can I expect in my lifetime? I'm just kind of here. If they're going to be good again, sure, I'll pay attention, but I'll have to suffer whenever they're bad. I'll just.
I actually kind of hope that this is like completely unhinged thing that only a Patriots fan could say. I almost hope that the Pats like never have the same success that they did in my formative years, just so that when I'm like 50 or 60 years old, I can like be the whiny Pats fan. Oh, it's been so bad for so many years, but it like at the same time.
New subject. Thank you.
So as we move forward here in this conversation, we've got some people that commented on our Twitter post where we're looking, and you can look. I know we're not the most active Twitter brand that there is at Dynasty PTS, but I did ask for some terrible trade offers or terrible trades that people have seen for Malik Nabers, and I think this is doing it wrong. right? This is Ladd and a projected mid 26th first for him.
No.
That's just getting rid of him for the sake of getting rid of him.
What is the point? The only point to getting rid of him, if you're going to move him, is you need to get the same level of production this year. You can do that in multiple ways. You can get another young elite receiver. You can get an older elite player and then hopefully a lot of extra stuff on top to backfill for the future. But like, do not trade him for a wide receiver 2 or wide receiver 3. There's no point to doing this, even if you get a first on top. It just doesn't make sense.
Right. And then we've also got Nabers for JSN and a 28th third. So that seems to be the most
Great.
That seems to be the most common. Like the JSN stuff seems to be the most common pivot. So maybe I was completely wrong and there are more people willing to make that deal than I thought. Not something that I could possibly have just expected by looking at it. Then I obviously went to our guys at Dynasty Daddy. And again, I see Malik Nabers in a 26 second for Chris Godwin and JSN. I think that's pretty interesting. And then one that I was very surprised at, Omarion Hampton and George Pickens for Malik Nabers, Jalen Noel, a third and a fourth. So Hampton and the running backs are definitely, and I've seen that in our Discord as well. That link is in the description. I've seen Hampton for him, and I've seen comments that were like, well, he and Hampton are probably going to be valued pretty close together by, week 1 next season. So I think that's fine now. I find that to be very interesting. But Jacob, let's talk about just some players generally. I'll let you kind of lead the way here for players. Like, where would the line be for players and that we would or wouldn't trade for him?
So, I mean, you can structure deals in different ways. The first thing I'd say is that any deal that does not include a player who reasonably projects to be a top, like a true 16 to 17 plus point per game player rest of season, if the deal does not include one of those players back, then it's just not worth considering, in my opinion. How that structure takes hold is dependent. If we're just talking straight up wide receiver for wide receiver, assuming we do all the caveats that your team is in the reasonable enough position where trading Nabers is viable instead of just blowing up the whole team. I would certainly trade him for Puka, Chase, Jefferson, Lamb. JSN is where it gets a little complicated. I've already said I would do Amon Ra. I think that's my line. I think I wouldn't go down to Nico, who's my next highest ranked receiver. I might consider it, but I'd certainly need a plus. I wouldn't do it for Tat. I don't think I would do it for Rome or Wilson or London at all. Agbuka is an interesting one because that's one that's been very popular. And I think you could do it, but you need a plus. The reason I like that one is because there's actually an option for you to just straight up win the trade. Mm-hmm. Like Agbuka, if he just becomes a stud, similar to, I saw someone disagree with what I said about Tat, and they made a fair point that like there's a world which you lean into the variance, Tat becomes as good as Nabers, and you just win the trade with enough of a plus. But Agbuka to me is a good mix of, even though I prefer Tat straight up in my rankings, this is like the fun of the game is that Agbuka makes more sense to me because it's a way easier for me to envision him being a top 10 wide receiver this year. And if you were able to get like close to a first level of ad on top, then there's an outcome where Agbuka just keeps going strong all year, and he's being drafted like 3 picks after Nabers in startups next year, and you've netted a big ad on top for this player. So I'm curious where you guys land on that one. Like, would anyone do Nabers for Agbuka straight up? I've seen it. And if not, then how much of an ad would you need, or are you just not even considering that as a tear down guy?
I wouldn't tear down that far because what I feel like I would need would probably outprice that trade because again, the people that really, Agbuka scored again this week on a play that should have been picked twice. Now it was a hell of a throw. It wasn't picked. So, it should have been picked this, it should have been, but it wasn't, et cetera, et cetera. I will say though, man, the Bucs could have used those last seconds at the end of that game. Just get over the goal line, buddy. It's very rookie type ish, but it's not why I wouldn't trade for him. It's just a statement. But I'm not going that far. I'd still want to keep it within the range of elites, but at the same time, I also wouldn't go to Nico. Right? Nico's clearly not quarterback / system proof. So, is he really in that next elite level of player? I think I stop around Amon Ra St. Brown. I think that is. I wouldn't go to, say, Garrett Wilson. I wouldn't go to Tet straight up. I think I'm in that JSN Amon Ra St. Brown range to me. Like, I'm not going to wide receiver 12 or 11 in Dynasty, and those other guys are in my top 10. I think that's about as far as I'm willing to go. Would
you all potentially try, like, it's tough to say move up from Nabers, but would you potentially do something like Nabers and let's say 27 second for Puka?
I'd do Nabers and a first for Puka.
I would do whatever it took to get Puka.
Okay.
There was a point last week where I was having serious discussions about putting Puka as Dynasty wide receiver 1. And my
Dynasty wide receiver 1 now because he was behind Nabers for me. Yeah.
Well, my exact reply was, well, I would, but Nabers exists. And I was like, man. And then I couldn't put him past Jefferson still because I just think Jefferson is unbelievable and not like aging at all. So yeah, it's an interesting and tough question now, but I would easily I would add whatever I needed. I would not add a 1, but I would add what was needed if it wasn't a 1. I would try to do like a 2 and a, in a player, like a fake,
what about
a Coker or something.
What about Nabers? Let's assume obviously you're planning to contend because you're doing this trade. Nabers in your 26-1 for Puka, and I assume they wouldn't want to give their own 2 because they're trying to rebuild. But let's say Puka and some random other managers mid to late 26-2 for Nabers in your 26-1 contending 1. I would do that deal.
I think that would be fine because you're getting you're supplementing, like we always say, 2.5 seconds for equals a first, give or take, right? And you're still competing. So I think that is, I think that's pretty interesting too. Yeah, I would say I wouldn't do the down to the a lot of people talking about, would you go BTJ in a 1? Like BTJ was taking it to 2-1. Like I'm not going there. Like I think when it's all said and done, I'll say this. I think if you're trading Malik Nabers and you're wondering, what his value might end up, I think Malik Nabers gets drafted at the 2-2 or the 2-1 next year. Like I think that's where he ends up going. So that is what you're expecting to lose out on. So whatever you were trading or drafting or trading for Brian Thomas Jr. is kind of what you're going to be losing or missing out on end of the day by week 1 next year. Does that make sense? The way I said it in my head, that made
totally
a ton of sense.
No, it makes total sense. Let's talk other positions.
I've been interested in this.
I have an interesting running back trade here, actually, if we want to lead off
hear it.
with this maybe.
Let's lead off with it.
This might be like the value loss litmus test because it is a value loss, but I kind of don't hate it. So and this is just from Fantasy Calc pulled. It's Malik Nabers and Quinshon Judkins for Jahmyr, Gibbs, and Davante Adams.
Oh, I would have a hard time trading Judkins right now. I'm gonna be a no on that deal.
Yeah, that's the one we talked about before. Man. Not without
it's interesting to me because
it's a fun deal. It fits a lot of what I want. It's just the value's a little tough for me.
I don't think I could hit that final send button. I think if it were in front of me, I'd construct it, I'd think about it, and then when it came time to do it, I think I would chicken out.
It makes a lot of sense. I would not criticize that the way I've criticized some of the Ladna first type of deals. Like if someone did that, I totally get it.
So if you were on a rebuilder, which if you have Jahmyr, Gibbs, and Davante Adams, the rest of your team must be going really, really terribly. But I think that's like an awesome deal for a rebuilder because Judkins definitely has some juice. Gibbs is going to outscore him this year. I think who knows what type of run he could potentially go on. And Adams is defying time right now. He'll still probably be good for a couple more years, but the opportunity to buy Judkins before he really skyrockets and also get a slightly discounted Nabers, like that's pretty good.
Yeah.
Okay,
I would be most excited to be the rebuilder getting Nabers and Judkins on this side of the deal.
Yeah.
It makes me think of it though from the contender side because that's a redraft trade I'd have been happy to do a week ago. Like that arguably that arguably increases your 2025 title odds even if Nabers were still playing.
Oh.
Like to me, that one's like a pretty big like carrot that is being dangled there. So I don't know.
Here's a trade that I just realized I did get done. I didn't know I'd got it done. I don't have notifications for all my leagues. I'll start off with the initial stages of the negotiations because we went back and forth on this a few times. So you guys can be in the position of my league mate. So my initial offer, Tom might be in this league. My initial offer was my Ashton Jeanty, which was a player that I had taken with my natural 101. It's like one of the worst teams I've ever drafted. It's been horrible for eternity. So it was Ashton Jeanty and Terry McLaurin, and I asked for Nabers and his 27-1, which obviously, by the way, I've set this up. You know that was not accepted, but curious your thoughts on the initial offer.
Nabers in a 1, Jeanty and McLaurin.
Yeah.
That's like...
I would be disgusted, but I'm not hitting accept.
Yeah, I mean, zero interest if I'm in giving up.
You're not interested.
My 1 for the privilege of Gent. Yeah, no.
All right. So you're not accepting that, and he didn't accept that either. He counters with offering me Nabers and his 27-1. So exactly what I asked for, but he changes it from Jeanty and McLaurin to Jeanty and Addison. Now you play the role of me. Are you hitting accept on that counter offer?
First for Addison.
I think yes.
Man, I think God.
I think I'd be pretty indifferent between Addison and a first on a rebuilder. So I think I'm just getting from Jeanty to Nabers, which is the more stable asset, probably the higher value ceiling asset.
Yeah, I bet Jeanty's worth more next in startups.
Yeah, he's going to be a first round pick.
Fair.
So I was like, I need extra on the other side. So I declined this, but I counter offer back with McLaurin. But I counter with, instead of this 27-1, I asked for his 26 and 27-2s. So Jeanty and McLaurin for Nabers, his 26-2 and his 27-2. That offer was
easy.
accepted.
Yeah, easy.
That one you feel like good about both sides?
Your version's better. Yeah.
Yeah.
I like that.
Yeah.
I went and found what league it was so I could see where it was. I need to do
fourth and go.
Yeah, I need to do the same thing you're doing and get rid
They
of
also gave him an alternate option of Igbuka for Nabers straight off the top. Went on the Jeanty counters instead.
Oh yeah, I lost Lamb in that league too. Absolutely cooked. Let's look at some of the chat here. I have Brian Thomas Jr. and Nabers. Need to sell one of them to contend. Options: Addison, Flowers, Derrick Henry, Chase Brown, maybe Trevion Henderson. Thoughts? It's a 12-team PPR dynasty. I would trade Brian Thomas Jr. before I traded Malik Nabers if I needed to contend.
I think you're rebuilding if these are your options and you have BTJ and Nabers.
BTJ and Nabers. And you just sell one of them to contend. Options: Addison, Flowers, Derrick Henry. Yeah, that's a tough one. Not doing any of those.
What if you could do like a Flowers and a Trevion Henderson?
But like, is that doing a lot for you?
I'm asking. In
Yeah,
he can't.
It depends on what your team is.
So.
Let's say your team has like a lot of other elites, but it's just shallow. Like maybe the Flowers Henderson thing is like kind of viable because I don't hate that on value. But if you already had like a well-constructed roster, then I want the elite producer back. I don't want, I love Flowers, but he's not Nabers. And Henderson, I also love, but he's like a flex play until further notice. So I don't know that that's helping you accomplish. Like if you're trading away Malik Nabers, the goal has to be win the championship in 2025. And I don't know how much that's helping you.
Right. I like that answer. Good answer there. Macho Man Zandy says, just getting here, but I traded Barkley, Waddle, and a late 2 for Nabers, Coker, and a mid 3.
Yeah, that's really fun.
I like that. That is a great structure of the deal right there.
Yeah, that is a great structure. How high are we bumping Waddle up, by the way? I mean, now it's the first mention of Waddle. Pretty big impact in his life. I mean, Tyreek Hill's the other injury. It's less fun to talk about trades because I don't know if he's ever going to play football again. And if he is, like, the chances that he is anything close to what he was after that devastating injury seem pretty dismal. That looked like kind of a Nick Chubb-esque injury. But yeah, so John Atlas asked exactly this question. How much does Waddle move up after the Hill injury? First, how much do you think he moves up from a rest of season perspective? And then how much do you think of that is projected over the rest of his dynasty life?
So I have him as like a fringe top 20 wide receiver rest of season, which is maybe slightly on the aggressive side. But after Hill went out, 33% target share. We've seen Waddle dominate targets in a world without Tyreek Hill before. I think he can be like a 27 to 29% target share on a bad team with a quarterback that has to drop back and throw the ball a bunch. So yeah, like wide receiver 2-ish production rest of season is probably what I expect. In Dynasty, it's a little more interesting. I don't know. I don't think he's taken seriously as a Dynasty asset again until he starts scoring like legitimate points again. So if you get like the 14 points per game from Waddle for the rest of the season, I don't think people are lining up to trade like a first plus for him next offseason or anything.
The two questions are probably the same question, right? It's like if he produces as a wide receiver 1 this year, he's going to be worth a lot. If he doesn't, he's stuck in the late first zone for the rest of his life.
Yep.
What were you going to ask, Tom?
I was going to say, would you rather have Devonta Smith or Jaylen Waddle?
In Dynasty? I already prefer
in Dynasty.
Yeah,
well,
Waddle.
I want nothing to do with the Eagles rest of season. I already preferred Waddle in Dynasty. I definitely do now.
The reason I ask is because Waddle, if you go to, let's say, like a keep trade cut, is ranked behind Devonta Smith by like quite a few spots. Like
the Devonta Smith stuff is fascinating because AJ Brown's struggles have given him so much cover. Like everybody's focusing on how bad it's been for AJ Brown because it's been really bad, and he's the higher profile name. But like Devonta Smith has been the exact same thing. Like he had the one good game, which was the same good game that AJ had, and he's been useless otherwise, but nobody's talking about it. But like it's a systemic issue there.
Yeah, agreed. Yeah, I've been out on Devonta Smith for 2 years now, so I've been wondering, when you get a boost like this, because Waddle was kind of right in there in that T. Higgins, Waddle, Flowers kind of purgatory there. Some guys have moved up, some guys have moved down. So that's what I was wondering, because again, there are a few spots in the aggregator sites. So I was wondering, like, that's definitely a market inefficiency. I expect that to swap in the next week or so, but take advantage while you can, right?
Yeah, I mean, I'll say how extreme I am about this. So I had to do these rest of season rankings. I've never done in-season rest of season rankings before. It's a really fun exercise. Spoiler alert, you will see a redraft trade value chart / kind of calculator that I'm doing for The Athletic this year. That'll be out probably tomorrow or today, or tomorrow or Thursday. So I had to do rest of season rankings. And I have one
with The Athletic now. Like, didn't tell any of us. Like, just like kids were like, oh, by the way, like underdog now The Athletic. Just a small thing.
Well, it's actually very fun. I'll say this too. I mentioned it's going to be a redraft trade tier calculator. The rankings aren't based on it, but the scale. So like how I come up with the numerical value for each tier is pulled from our co-host Lucas Gilbert, which I also did without telling him, but I did with citation. I just took your WAR per game basically metric and then just scaled it to a 0 to 100 basis. And then I just, instead of picking the actual names, because obviously WAR is descriptive rather than predictive, I just inputted that with my rest of season rankings and then basically just calibrated it so that it calculates on a WAR per game basis. So Lucas Gilbert will be showing up in New York Times subscriptions this week without his knowledge. But
learning new things. Okay, love it.
But I did text you about it today. You didn't reply. I thought it was rude.
Oh my goodness! What did you?
I thought
I messaged Rudy you in the chat about it. So I have Jaylen Waddle at wide receiver 11 rest of season. You can disregard that because I'm like a massive Jaylen Waddle fan. I think more highly of his talent than probably Jaylen Waddle and Mrs. Waddle. But I have Devonta Smith down at wide receiver 38 rest of season. Like I would very clearly rather have Jaylen Waddle than AJ Brown rest of the season. So I would definitely rather have him than Devonta Smith, who's like stuck in the same shit as Brown, but with like less of a history of elite production. So
we said for years that we hated the spot because he's going to get alpha cucked, and he's being not only alpha cucked, but Jalen Hurts cucked, and it's not fun. It's
he's also a nicer person
in the cuck chair.
So like at least like when Brown like has these bad games, like he's going to find ways, I think, to fix it, either by like he's just going to become so intolerable to deal with that they're either going to force feed him targets to make him shut up, or they're going to trade him. But like, it kind of has to go one of those two ways. Like either they agree with him that he is very valuable and good, and they get him targets, or they disagree with him that he's that valuable and good, in which case, why are you paying him like $33 million a year to not produce for your team? Like send him to a different team. So one of those two things I think has to happen this season or next season. Smith, I guess, is like is just a nicer guy. So he's just going to like go along with being cocked by his quarterback for tush pushes for eternity.
Hey, this is one of those things where I said weeks ago, right? How often do we look at AJ Brown and go, man, I wish he was in an offense that used him? And one of the first comments we got was he had 1,400 yards and back-to-back. I know, but even in those seasons, we're like, man, if only they threw him the ball more.
When he's on the Patriots, everything's going to be great in my life.
I saw people already immediately get him to the Patriot. Like, we're going to do this receiver thing.
You grew up a Patriots fan. We got to remember this. How do I say tomorrow? Why is it weird?
You say it like tomorrow. Tomorrow.
Yeah.
It's tomorrow.
Tomorrow. I like
no.
tomorrow.
Hold on. You're gonna hear this podcast tomorrow.
Yes, Tom says it correctly.
Tomorrow.
No,
I've never thought about that once in my life before.
Lucas also says it correctly.
Tomorrow.
Oh my gosh, the years of speech therapy are.
Now I'm trying to think of the Blur song
me.
for Tomorrow, and I'm trying to think of how Damon Albarn pronounces it, because that's the measure by which I'll admit whether I'm correct or.
Well, you can't say Canadian.
She's a 21st century gal.
Because
tomorrow. I think he says tomorrow. I'm going with tomorrow.
Jacob and I are both Canadian, so you can't say, oh, Canadians, you know. But I'll admit my East Coast comes out of me every once in a while. If we did not we're going to answer that last super chat out of the break. But if you asked a question and it wasn't answered, I will be answering them in our comment section. So it helps us a lot. Not only if you hit the like button, if you leave comments, it's a great way for me to answer the questions that we don't get to on this show live, because we don't want this to be 2 hours. And it also gets an opportunity for your question to be answered. If you ask it to a certain member of the team, I will send it to them. They can give me a response, and I'll make sure your question is answered. So as soon as the stream is over, drop your question into the comment section. I will be here answering them all the way up until next week's show. I do not miss one, so please do that. That being said, hopefully some of these trade structures helped you out. Hopefully we've given you a little bit of a look into what we would and wouldn't do and how we would do it. I think my overall arching final statement on this is, no matter the league type that you're in, okay, it doesn't matter if it's a casual dynasty league. It does not matter if it is a $50 buy-in, a $25 buy-in, a $100 buy-in, or quote unquote high stakes, right? $1,000, $1,500. The theory remains the same, in my opinion. Keep yourself level-headed, keep yourself engaged, always be active with your other managers, and do the things that are best for your team. All right. It doesn't matter if you're part of the absolute brain rot side of Dynasty that uses right and left-wing slappy puns on every post, or if you are more of a standard casual player that has a couple leagues with your friends. The information is the same. The process and the theory remains the same in being level-headed, or if you're more like Jacob, a little more aggressive. It all applies to every single one of those leagues. Super flex, single quarterback leagues, all the above. Be smart.
It's just like the hive mind. We all just argued for an hour and 20 minutes just to all agree that Amon Ra St. Brown is the worst wide receiver you can trade him for.
Yeah.
I guess it's the woke mind virus. I don't know. I guess we all we all just decided on that. That's boring. I wish we disagreed.
Jacob, I haven't talked to you since this happened last Thursday night. Have you considered converting to being a right wing slappy, given the success that all the people you call on Twitter, right? I just completely messed that up.
We're not getting into that.
Of all the people you call right wing slappies on Twitter,
we're not getting into that. We're not getting into that one on air. Absolutely not. I know what you're referencing, and we're not going there.
You know, it's something kind of drastic, and Jacob's not going to go there online. So we'll move it. We've got our weekly picks that we are going to get into before we get out of here. But again, like I said, if your question wasn't answered, leave it after the show, and I'll make sure it gets answered. Sit tight. When we come right back, we've got our weekly picks, and we're going to get out of here. Don't go anywhere.
45 seconds? Nah, that. This ad is over after I say fantasypoints.com.
Okay, Silent Goldie did send us a super chat here. He's 3-1. It's a 12-team PPR quarterback. This is a dynasty league. He's got Jaden Daniels, Stafford. He's got McBride, Achane, Etienne, Tootin, Judkins, Scatabo, Benson. Like you're doing pretty good. Brian Thomas Jr., Debo, Waddle, Hunter said, "How can I upgrade?" And I don't know what the last part of that is.
Thoughts on the team.
On the team. There we go. Thank you, Ryan. You're probably reading my text so often that you can understand it being broken. So shout out to you, because I can't.
You know, some of us rely more on Grammarly than others in their writing, and you just you build a skill for parsing stuff. I'm talking about myself, by the way, not about Tom. You build a skill for parsing misspelled words.
I would say, like, looking at that, I'd be looking to try to move ETN for another wide receiver. That'd be just my first thought, but I have no belief in ETN. So if you can try to use him to... What's that?
Very left-wing sloppy of you.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. I have no idea what any of that means now, so I'm going to have to educate myself later. But
Lucas, be very careful treading on the Travis Etienne people. I made that mistake on social media today. My mentions are very full of people.
And I made sure to link. I did you a big favor. I linked your tweet in my article today, but I didn't say, here's this tweet from Ryan Heath. I just made it a soft link so that I wouldn't lead further angry people into your comment sections.
I'll say this, right? The whole thing is he's going to stop scoring points after September. So Ryan, it's do or die.
We're running out the clock.
I'll say this for Travis Etienne. His touchdown run just ruled so hard.
It was sick.
So he perfectly blocked around the edge. That's all fine. But like, it was ironically like the exact kind of run of why I tend to defend high yards before contact runners, because he's streaking down the sideline. People didn't watch the games. There's a safety that has the angle on him that if he just keeps running straight is almost certainly going to run him out of bounds. He could have also cut inside, which is what like 90% of running backs do. But then, and he jukes up that safety, but he almost certainly then loses too much speed, and one of the linebackers who's chasing after him tackles him. And like how he decided in the moment to just instinctively or mathematically or whatever do this fun little jab step where he fakes like he's going to cut inside, but then just scoots right back, frees the safety. It ruled extremely hard.
Yeah.
Shout out to Travis Etienne.
A well-executed dead leg stop, which is what we often refer to that too, is it was my favorite move when I played running back or I was returning kicks, even if like it didn't ever work. I still did it all the time, because you know who I found did that the most was Fred Taylor, another Jacksonville Jaguars running back. Did it all the time. He was great.
You know who did it on their receiving touchdown earlier this year? It was Facial Tootin. So I don't know who taught who, but they both made the same move on their touchdown.
As far as RB thing.
This guy has ridiculous running backs. So clearly the move is like, I wouldn't even focus on a specific player, but you have 5 startable running backs. I'm guessing, unless you have really crazy league settings, you can't start them all the same week. So yeah, I would be looking at that grouping of Etienne and Scatterbo and Benson and looking at, okay, could I move 1 or 2 of these running backs, maybe one of them with a wide receiver to get a big upgrade at the wide receiver position, because you're pretty imbalanced.
I would also throw out there, and maybe people get mad at me for this, but if you could take a Benson, a Scattaboo, an ETN, or Tootin, whichever side of the argument you're on, I'm going to play the middle ground here, and pair him up with the Travis Hunter to go and get a more elite type wide receiver, that's also a way of getting that next level of player. Just a thought.
Go get like Davante Adams.
By the way,
is what is like.
I know he didn't score any points, but the Hunter catch this week was like enough for me to just like hold strong for the next 2 years, no matter what happens. That rocked. I know who's never fucking leaving his feet to go make that catch over the middle. It rhymes with try and bomb us.
Yeah, it would be nice if Trevor Lawrence stopped throwing balls that required receivers to leave their feet that high.
Well, look, maybe that's just a skill match. One guy throws hospital balls and one guy likes the hospital.
Oh gosh, you're unbelievable on what you choose to care about on a week-to-week basis.
Just like again this weekend, just lack of concentration, sideline ball. Oh, I don't need to get my feet down. Who knows? Like maybe he's modeling a team after Donovan Mingo.
Oh my God, Jacob. I know I say you flip-flop a lot, but this Brian Thomas Jr. stuff is an extreme. He
flip-flopped. He used to be good. Now he's bad. What am I supposed to do?
I don't think he's actually bad. Let's get into the weekly game.
I don't think he's bad, but he's playing bad.
Recapping, I absolutely cooked last week. Not enough to pass Ryan, unfortunately, but I narrowed that gap. Oh,
I was terrible, and I was genuinely shocked to see that I was still in the lead. Like
you had a pretty big lead, but you're coming back to the pack at least. It's going to be a dogfight this year.
Right. So Lucas, you're going to start us off. You have 177.7. Then it's Jacob at 198.3. I have 203.84, and Ryan has 219.78. Lucas, who do you got this week? Lucas,
am I still here?
Yeah, that is the worst. Someone take a screenshot. That might be the worst possible freeze frame that you could end up with. But you are still here.
Okay, I'll keep talking then, even though I can't even see who I have. So I'm going to try to do this from memory. I believe I chose Bryce Young just because it should be a little bit of a plus matchup. I cannot remember the running back I chose, but
Montgomery.
Thank you, David Montgomery. Just because I have a feeling that once they put a pounding on whichever bad team they're facing, that's the Bengals. After they're done putting a pounding on the Bengals, the Montgomery's going to just take over. At wide receiver, please help me out.
Darius Slayton,
just because, I'm hoping I get the 117-point game that he's going to do this season. Oh, and I can see myself again. And then at tight end, I was going throughout fantasy points, and in the research tool, they have the schedule adjusted points per game allowed for each position. And so I was looking for somebody that would actually be helpful for me to have. And I'm losing where I was here. Son of a gun.
Lucas is in shambles today.
Yeah, holy cow. I got absolutely broken.
You have Juwan? No, you don't. Wrong week.
Oh, I have Kate Otten. Yeah, so I was looking throughout fantasy points here with the schedule adjusted points per game. And Tampa Bay, once this loads, actually has a decent matchup this week for tight ends. Going against Seattle, I believe they're fourth most for tight ends. So I was excited to do that.
Long way to go to explain that you're still going to be last in this game next week. Jacob, you're up.
All right. Quarterback, I'm going with the man who has done more harm to the left-wing slappy cause than the defund the police slogan. That's Geno Smith. Just looking horrible this year. But he gets the Colts. And the Colts are a pretty great matchup for opposing quarterbacks because their offense is still continuing to click whenever A.D. Mitchell doesn't completely sabotage it single-handedly. They're going to put up points on the Raiders. I'm not too concerned about that. And without Kenny Moore and without Jalen Jones, our secondary is an abomination. I mean, this game, shout out to Charvarius Ward. He's still good. He did his job on Davante Adams. Puka was just going to work on Xavier Howard. like that Xavier Howard, who used to be good in like 2017 for the whole game, and it was elder abuse. Like it was just ridiculous. There's at this point talk that Xavier Howard might get benched for a UDFA that we liked. So I don't think he's going to do much better. I expect Geno to have success passing on this team. At running back, I decided to do the cheap thing because I am in third now, and I took Rachaad White. Not sure that Bucky Irving misses this week. I hope he doesn't miss this week, but it seems like it's probably greater than 50%. Don't ask me how injuries work. I don't fully understand how he is potentially going to be missing multiple weeks, but yet was able to roast Jihad Campbell for a 72-yard touchdown after the injury. But that seems to be the case. I guess adrenaline is a hell of a drug. And then I'm taking Steph Diggs because it's a revenge game. He's playing on Sunday Night Football against the Buffalo Bills. He also finally got ramped up to being closer to a full-time player this week. He looked really good in this game against Carolina. Drake May looks quite good. Nobody else on New England is good in their receiver group, other than Hunter Henry, if you count him. So Steph Diggs, I think, is well-positioned to be a fun, cheap dynasty buy and start this week. And then I'm taking People Are Strange When You're a Stranger, who gets to play against Kansas City this week. They're going to keep everything in front of them. I think I'm just going to get out ahead of it. Trevor Lawrence versus Steve Spagnuolo in prime time. It's not going to be good for the brand. Okay, it's not. It's not. He's going to average 5.2 yards per attempt. He's going to get sacked 6 times. He's going to throw 3 picks. But Brendan Strange is going to get there on like 7 catches for 55 yards.
The leading receiver. Known causer of eye rolls on this podcast previously. But I'm going next. I'm sitting here in second, and no shock to anybody, but I'm just taking as many people as I can versus the Ravens, who are rolling out Cooper Rush and like
God, everyone got hurt.
Jesus, like they're also missing like 5 starters on defense.
I know. Zay Flowers is going to be like the John Travolta Pulp Fiction gif, where it's like, oh, I'm the only good player on this team now. Like,
so
they lost out of week A, Roquan.
This could be an actual get-right game for Houston. So I'm going to go C.J. Stroud. Because all I need is one deep connection or 2. Trust me, this is the week to bloody well do it. They couldn't cover Nico when healthy. I'm going to take Woody Marks here, who's just going to get all day to run through a defense that couldn't stop a nosebleed when healthy. Can't imagine how that's going to go with everybody out this week. He looked absolutely explosive. I'm going to go with my boy Chris Godwin, second on the team in targets last week, his first game back. Only 1 first read behind Egbuka. Not bad first game back. Would like to have seen a little bit more production out of it, but I think this is a good week for him to do that. And then at tight end, I'm going to go with the 2-touchdown, formerly retired turned rapper back to football player Darren Waller, who did pull in 2 touchdowns. With the Tyreek Hill injury, who knows? So I just need a big game. No one to counterbalance Ryan Heath this week. I made the call. He picked Golden. I talked a lot about Golden last week. That means Dobbs was destined for a touchdown, as Jordan Love was out there looking for that giant-ass helmet every time he threw into the red zone. But I don't have that kind of confidence this week. So, Ryan, please, if you wouldn't mind, have a bad week. What do you got?
All right. So, QB, going Matt Stafford. I think the ceiling is just demonstrably higher this year. We've had like the DFS discussion enough times where it's like Stafford has never gone over 25 points in however many games, so we can't play him with the 2 wide receivers that are getting 70% of the targets and project awesome. We can. We're going to play Matt Stafford against the 49ers. Going Trey Benson against the Titans, I realized during this that there's like a potential Trey Benson injury. I've seen like 3 tweets about maybe he's hurt.
Yeah.
If we're doing injury subs, which I think we allowed Tom to do last week, so I'm going to stand here and say you have to let me do it. We are just like screwed at running back here, but honestly, maybe I should, but let's take, I don't know that the Michael Carter role is what I want to sign up for. So I'm actually going to go Chuba Hubbard against the Dolphins as my injury sub. Put that in stone. I thought it was outside the top 20.
We did top 20.
Yeah.
Okay, that's fair.
Okay, yeah.
Thank God. I thought
we
we were doing outside the top 24 for no good reason, but I looked through the list, and like I forgot what bye weeks and injuries does to a person. Like it gets like if in the make-believe world where I didn't know the rules of this game and Woody Marks was already off the table, like after 24, it's like Chase Brown, Trevion Henderson, Ramondre Stevenson, Nick Chubb, Zach Charbonnet. Like it is rough out there.
Yeah, I was close to just picking Charbonnet and saying, you know what, he's going to get 3 goal line carries, and maybe that's what I want to stake it on. But I'll go Hubbard, who doesn't get goal line carries instead.
Yeah.
Hubbard's the sub. Benson is the RB1. Wide receiver Keon Coleman. Don't ask me about this Patriots secondary. It's not been great. Don't think Gonzo fixes it. None of that stuff. So yeah. Keon Coleman, and then Zach Ertz at tight end, my guy. Finally get to pick him because he's outside the top 12 this reason for some week.
Didn't you guys give
this
like
week
$50
for some
million
reason.
to Carlton Davis?
Yes, but it's.
How's that going? Not going well.
He said he didn't want to talk about
it's going. Yeah, I did say I don't want to talk about it.
He's just trying to get something out of a Patriots fan who wants the team to be bad.
Please let me milk every bit of sympathy I can out of being
Ryan,
a Patriots fan.
here's I have a trade proposal. Your guys' secondary is struggling. We will give you former All-Pro Xavier Howard, and you can give us nothing.
I don't know, man. I think we might have to hit the decline on that one.
One trip to McDonald's.
2-time All-Pro. Don't look up when that was.
I think I was actually under 30. I think when that was.
They asked Steichen if he was going to bench Xavier Howard this week in this press conference, and he was like, "Look, he's had a great career in this league." And I was like, "Oh man, that's how you know it's over."
It's tough. Davis and retire like during the game.
Once you become a past tense player, it's tough when your coach starts referring to things you used to do.
Well, that's the Nick Chubb thing too. He's had a great career. He's got a lot of wear and tear on him. It's like that's not going to end up well. Well, that's it. That's it for the show this week. Again, if your questions haven't been answered, because again, we only do one of these a week live, and it's hard to get a lot of listener questions in and not have this go 2 hours. So if you have a question, you can leave it after the show is done. It helps us a lot. Hitting that like button helps us a lot. We've set, again, another record with 1 day less for Dynasty Points, both on YouTube and the podcast downloads. So shout out to you guys. Always being there every single week. Mini pod doing well. Obviously, Market Report doing our thing every Friday morning when that gets released. Shout out to Jacob, who's just picking up jobs in the fantasy football industry, so much so that he can't even reach out to tell his friends. So shout out to Jacob for being able to do that. You can get the link to Thinking About Thinking at his profile over there on X. You obviously have everything that Ryan Heath is constantly working on every single week. Scott never lets him leave the house. And Lucas Gilbert in and around the Discord with all of the prize pick stuff and all of the war stuff, of course. So lots here from Dynasty Points to you guys in terms of content over at fantasypoints.com. I love you guys. Appreciate everyone for listening, tuning in, leaving comments, all of it. We wouldn't be here without you. Remember that clear-eyed full hearts can never lose. At your best days, they're always spent tilting. Good night, everybody.
What?
Why are you shaking your head?
You're welcome.